All right. We are getting ready for day 3, session 11, with Dean Mioli from SEI Investments. How to save 10% by doing nothing. Everybody likes to do nothing, right? It's even better if you can save 10%. So I'm going to read a short intro for Dean. His nickname is the Tax Doctor. You can wear your white coat though.
I have one in the car with a stethoscope to get into character.
Dean serves as the Director of Investment Planning for the SEI Advisor Network. In this role, he's responsible for supporting the delivery of advice-driven asset management solutions for SEI advisors and their clients. This investment support is in the form of custom investment case analysis and proposal support for SEI advisors, as well as technical investment support for SEI advisors and relationship directors. Dean Mioli.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Did anyone say good beer? I like the beer very much. 60-minute is my favorite. At home, I'll have the 90-minute, but that's very strong. So I don't like to be near a car if I have a 90-minute. The description here is save an extra 10% by doing nothing. I can't promise that. That sounds like something you would hear, like a weight loss program. I do absolutely nothing and lose 10% of your weight. We're going to talk about how to actually be active with tax management and save a boatload of money. Now, the title of my presentation, Tax Lies and Duct Tape. Now, that was kind of a spin-off of a movie of about 15 years ago. Anyone remember the name of that movie? Sex Lies and Video Tape. Just a curiosity out of that. All right, well, let's get going. I'll tell you, April 15th was sticker shock for many Americans because the tax law changes that happened January 1 of 2013 was a sleeper. No one was talking about it until you met with your accountant this year and they filled out your forms, and guess what? You owed $10,000 more. And you said to your accountant, you must have fat-fingered a number. My income didn't go up, my deductions didn't change, and I owe $10,000 more. How does that happen? I'll tell you why. The tax law changed. We have new surtaxes on earned income and unearned income. We have a new top tax rate, 39.6%. We have phase-outs of itemized deductions and personal exemptions. If I was a CPA, I would have doubled every one of my clients' fees this past tax year. Because the tax law complexity went from about a 4 to about a 9.5. I just made a computed in my head, even the AMT. I cannot do that anymore. So what if I lost half my clients? So I made the same as much money. Just worked half this hard. Not a bad gig. Okay, this is what we're going to cover. A little review of the current tax system. We're going to get into capital loss and gain considerations. We're going to cover the new Medicare surtaxes. I'm going to tell you how to review a 1040. I saw a very interesting news article today. Listen to this. 29% of advisors, only 29% of advisors have initiated conversations regarding the tax hit to clients' portfolios this past year. Only 11% of advisors have a relationship with their client's CPA. That is amazing to me. Astounding. If your financial planner is not talking to your CPA, that's a problem. That is a huge problem in my mind. Sometimes it could be the same person, but if they're not, there's got to be coordination amongst your advisors. You got to have a quarterback. You got to have a Tom Brady, making sure everybody's talking to each other. Peyton Manning, running an offense or a defense, you've got to have a play caller. Very important part of the process. We'll talk about Roth conversions and the power of the charitable remainder trust. There's going to be a complete renaissance in charitable planning. Now, SEI, shameless plug, is a trust company. We do a lot of trust work. CLTs, charitable deed trusts, are back on the agenda. People have big incomes, don't want to report income tax on that. Looking at lead trusts. People have big gains in stocks, want to sell a business, charitable remainder trust. Very powerful. I'll give you the one thing you need to know out of here right now. After I tell you this, you can leave. I don't care. You cannot have spikes in your income. That's the worst thing that could happen to you right now, is have a big spike in your income. Because when you have a big spike in your income, you get pushed into the 39.6% tax bracket. Your tax return is going to go on fire. There's going to be problems all over the place. You need to manage income and spread it out over as many tax years as you possibly can. That is tax planning. And when we talk about deductions, there's a big difference between an above the line deduction, which is when we compute your adjusted gross income, also known as AGI. They're extremely valuable. Then we have deductions called itemized deductions. That's a below the line deduction, and guess what? They ain't worth anything anymore because they can be phased out. They could be AMT problems. There's hurdles that you need to get over. Like for instance, on your miscellaneous deductions, you have to go 2% of your AGI before you deduct $1. And if you're an AMT, game over. There's problems here. Okay, quick review of the tax law. Yes, we do have a new top tax bracket. I'll show you those brackets in a moment. Guess what? If you happen to be in that top tax bracket, your long-term capital gain rate is 20%, but I didn't add the surtax in. It's really 23.8. Brutal. 15 to 23.8. And of course, now you have these phase outs of your itemized deductions, personal exemptions. You can lose all your personal exemptions. Okay, family of 5, get $3,900 last year for each personal exemption. You can lose them all. And you can be phased out of most of your itemized deductions. It's your standard deduction. AMT, still here. No change to the AMT system other than the fact that they permanently indexed the AMT exemption amount. And if you're in a high income tax state, which Delaware is, New Jersey, New York, California, name some others, most of the returns I see, people are paying AMT. And that's not what the design was originally, but that's the reality of today. And guess what? It's such a huge revenue raiser, believe me, they're not going to be touching this anytime soon. Because if they take AMT away, who's going to pay? Someone's got to pay. We don't run a balanced budget right now. Okay. So here are your tax brackets, and kind of interesting, you want to see a really small tax bracket, look at this. For single filers in the 35% tax bracket, it's like $1,600. Isn't that the strangest thing you ever saw? A tax bracket? And even for married couples, what, 50,000 or so? I suspect that there'll be a correction here at some point. There's no such thing as a $1,000 bracket. Just when the haste of making the new tax law is done. So really, you go from 33 basically up to 430, 439.6. Very strange. All right, let's talk about capital gains. I believe it's line 13 of your 1040. Shows your capital gain and losses for the year. Okay? What is the magic number normally that you would want to see reported under 1040? If you're doing good tax planning, what would be the optimal number? No CPAs are allowed to answer. 3,000? Positive? Negative? You got the right number, just give me the sign before it.
Minus.
That is correct. Well done. The beers didn't affect your cloud judgment too much.
I didn't think for a second.
For most people, because the tax law says you can take all your gains, you can marry losses to your gains, and you're allowed 3,000 of losses in excess of your gains. Now, if you're in the 35% tax bracket, you harvest those extra 3,000 of losses, you just saved about $1,000 in federal tax. That sounds like a pretty smart tax idea to me. And for most of us, okay, 90% of us, that's going to be where you want to be. Get to that minus 3,000 if possible. But for some of us, it may not be optimal. Why? Because we now have 4 capital gain rates. And 0 is an option. If you happen to have a client or yourself in the 10 or 15% tax bracket, guess what? If you're married and your taxable income is below this number, your long-term capital gain rate is 0. 0. That's a good rate. I like 0. Anybody else like 0? Can I get a few hands on that? Thank you. Of course, also qualifying dividends would also be taxed at a 0 rate. Okay, and these are the other 2 rates, 15 and 20%. You can see the income levels where they come in. But this is based on taxable income. So here they throw this wrench in, they bring in this new Medicare surtax. And guess how they compute that? That's on adjusted gross income. And you'll notice that when you have adjusted gross income, minimum of $200,000 for single or $250,000 for married, you're at 18.8. And of course, if you're in that select crowd, 23.8. So there are your 4 rates. Point is, let's say I'm expecting to make more money next year, and I need to rebalance my portfolio. Okay, we maybe have another really good stock market year this year. I'd be more inclined to make that event happen in December, knowing I'm in the 15% tax bracket for long gains. Instead, if I waited till January, then I'd be paying a 23.8. So timing of income is critical and needs to be looked at on a regular basis. When do I want to recognize income? And you have some control over that. Okay? Timing of exercise of stock options. If you're in business, the timing of when you might bill somebody, December versus January. These are things that need to be discussed because there could be an optimal year to make that income recognition happen. Okay? Just don't do it without any thought to it. Very important. I used to think that if you did a 2-year tax projection, that was enough. Okay? You look at your base year, which is now 2013, you project 14 and 15, you kind of look over a few years and see how you're going to. If you have a complicated situation, you're looking at least 5 years. 5-year tax projection, maybe 10. You got to think about that far in the future. I think that's wise tax planning at this point. Very wise tax planning. Especially if you have a lot of unusual things going on. Very important part of the process. Okay, 2 new surtaxes came in as part of Obamacare. One is on earned income. So, married couple with wages of $300,000. Guess what? You're over the 250 threshold. Wages over that threshold, that extra $50,000, you're going to get whacked with an extra 90 basis point tax, 1.45 to 2.35. Guess what? There's no ceiling to this. I think the Social Security portion of Social Security tops out at about $117,000 this year. There is no ceiling to Medicare. You make $10 million, $20 million, you keep paying this. There is no ceiling to it. And if you're self-employed, you really have to pay. You have to pay the whole surtax yourself, and you don't get the deductor. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Some people wind up having to pay estimated tax penalties because of that. Then we also have a surtax on investment income, and it hits a lot of things. Look at the list. I'm sure some of you have these things: taxable interest, capital gains, rents, royalties, dividends, passive activity income. What's not on that list? Municipal bond interest. If you don't want to pay tax, and if you want to own fixed income, maybe that's part of your portfolio makeup, and you're in a non-qualified account, you want to own municipal bonds. That's the only thing I can, not much in the way of tax planning you can do, but municipal bonds, you don't want to pay income tax, that's your answer. And if you're in a 28% or higher federal tax bracket on top of the Delaware, even PA, you're over 30%, you should be thinking about municipal bonds. Absolutely. If fixed income is part of your complexion. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I'm writing a paper on this right now. We've always talked to our clients about asset allocation, but you know what the new words are today? Asset location. Where do I want to own certain portfolio assets? Emerging market debt, high yield bonds are very tax inefficient asset classes. Do I want to own those in my taxable account if I'm in a high tax bracket? If I have my choice, absolutely not. I'd rather tuck them into my 401k or my IRA. Why pay tax before you have to? Okay. The other thing about these surtaxes is there's no inflation protection. So more and more people will be caught up in these new surtaxes as time goes by. So here's the lay of the land. This is complicated. This is why if I was a CPA, I'd be doubling my fees. And I'll show you a chart that's going to scare the heck out of you in a second. You got the surtax, you got the PEP and P's phase outs, itemized deductions, personal exemptions, the top tax rate. And to me, it's like flying under the radar of all these things. You've got to look at how you're going to recognize income and deductions. And it's not easy. And if you have good advice, good counsel, it is well worth it. Okay? And if you can shift deductions above the line, you're doing yourself a big, big favor. A huge favor by doing that. And there are strategies, and we'll talk about how to do that. Any questions so far? Isn't this intriguing? Isn't this absolutely fascinating stuff? Of course it is. Now, I just had my fifth year wedding anniversary. I have gray hair, so I got married much later in life. Had a very long single life. I enjoyed myself, traveled the world, did a lot of things. And then you find the right person to get married. And 5 years in, I think I found the secret to a happy marriage. It only took me 5 years to figure this out, but I'll share it with you now, so you won't have to go through all that pain and aggravation. 12 Twice a week, my wife and I would go out to dinner. Good bottle of wine, candlelight, good food. I go on Tuesdays, she goes on Fridays. It's absolutely, it's working out. So here's that chart I was talking to you about. Why is your fee so much? Show them this chart. This is what I have to navigate. Okay? World's deadliest catch, you think they have a tough thing to navigate in that Bering Straits and that crazy ocean? Well, this is my Bering Straits right here. This is not easy. You have ordinary income taxes, A&T, taxes on wages, net investment income, phase outs, A&T. That is brutal. Brutal. Okay? That's our tax system on one page, and that is not easy. I will skip this, but it's in your materials. Now we're actually going to look at a 1040 and how I look at a 1040. It's a service that we provide some of our advisors. And I believe we're the only firm out there that's in the investment business that actually will do a tax return observation for clients and prospects. We will diagnose this tax return for tax planning ideas. So what do we have here? We have someone who's married, okay, husband and wife, no kids, they're out of the house, still working, they have wages, okay. Oops, let me go back real quick there. Taxable interest, $8,400, some tax exempt, $2,500. Dividends, ordinary, or total dividends of about 13, qualifying dividends of about 4. Capital gains, 36,000. That's the AGI, 342,000. Come to the next page. This is their itemized deductions. We're not going to go over that schedule today, but I will tell you this: that number was limited. They were subject to phase out. Also, their itemized deductions, as you see, it's $3,900 per, and they had 2, so that's about $7,800. That was subject to phase out, and I lost some of that as well. Taxable income. There's their regular tax, and there's the A&T. They wind up having to pay a little bit of A&T. That's their tax before credit. And here are those new taxes that we talked about. This is on earned income, and this is on unearned income. So they had $2,300 in new taxes. So that was their total tax bill. Okay. $74,000. All right, let's take a look at some of these items. I kind of went over these without doing a click on it. But all right, let's first look at interest. I will tell you that they're in a 33% federal tax bracket, just so you're clear. Taxable interest of $8,400, tax exempt to $2,500. To me, if you're in that high of a tax bracket, 33%, and of course they're also subject to that Medicare surtax at 3.8%, I should be owning taxable interest in my non-qualified accounts if I can help it. And if I change that from taxable interest to municipal interest, what would I save in taxes? Well, here you go. Here's the calculation. $8,445 times the federal tax rate, including the surtax, would save them $3,100 in tax. Interested? Does that interest you, $3,100? I can go to Europe for a week on $3,100. Go to the French Open. It's coming up this month. We went last year, I had a great time. Just found my money to go back. Okay? Not only that, there were some other issues here. One is they did have, and this was good in some respects, and they had some municipal interest. But guess what? I look for combinations when I look at a tax return. So they had tax exempt interest. I went to the next page. They had A&T problems. So I go to the A&T schedule. And guess what I find on line 12? That $1,500 of that $2,500 was private activity bond interest. Private activity bond interest is like municipal bonds and drag. It's not really a municipal bond, but it was probably like a parking lot next to a stadium, something like that. It's not really like a revenue bond, like a sewer bond or something like that. But they had some friends in politics who got them to classify as a municipal bond and so on. But the thing about it is, if you're an A&T and you own those types of bonds, guess what? They're taxable. Is that what you signed up for? I don't think so. I think you signed up for tax-free interest, not taxable. So by selling those bonds and buying true municipal bonds that aren't subject to that A&T, would save another $420. So I looked at 2 lines of a tax return. I just found $3,500 in tax savings. And any tax savings that I identify on a tax return, of course I can't go back in time, I'm not Superman, I can't see the world, I can change things for you. But going forward, if you do these things, you could say that. It's almost like an annuity, all the things that we're finding. Question?
Is the return on the municipal bond comparable to the taxable bond, so that math is going to work?
The question is, the fact that these were private activity bonds, does the interest rate that those bonds pay on an after-tax basis greater than municipal bonds that you would buy that weren't subject to that? That's a good question. That's a fair question. And it would depend on some factors. I think we could find bonds that on an after-tax basis, the true municipals, that would do better than that. These also tend to be low in quality. They tend to be low in quality. So that has to be part of the equation. Because a bond that's rated triple B is not the same as double A. Okay? Double A is a much higher credit quality rating. So you have to make sure you're comparing credit quality to credit quality. But typically these bonds are of low credit quality, and the thing about it is clients didn't know they had these. That's the bad part about it. The broker just pushed them into an account. They weren't told that they own these types of bonds until someone like myself, who can look at these things and say, do you know you own these types of bonds? You know that they're taxable? Did your broker discuss this with you? Most of the times the answers are no, 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 no. Okay, let's look at the dividend line. To me, this is a problem. Not so much that they had generated dividend income, but part of the problem is that so little of it is qualifying dividend income. The tax rate on the delta of this, which is about 70% of that, we'll just say $9,000, is being taxed at 36.8%. That's brutal, absolutely brutal. Only 30% of this number, about $4,000, is being taxed at 23.8%. So my point here is, if you're going to own tax-inefficient investments, where should you own them? Again, asset location. Very important part of the issue here. And depending on what they're investing in, for instance, mutual funds, which a lot of people invest in, but mutual fund tax efficiency is all over the place. It's like Thunderdome. You really need to understand the taxability of your mutual funds. Some are tax managed, some are not tax managed. If you're going to own a mutual fund and in your high tax bracket, you better be looking for tax managed mutual funds. Okay, they're managed in a way, there's processes in place that minimize distributions, that minimize the tax consequences of owning a mutual fund. Mutual funds have some nice benefits. You're part of a big crowd, you get a professional investment management at a reasonable price in most cases, but then there's the bad side of it. You're part of a crowd. There's nothing specialized or customized to you in that regard. Okay? Let's look at the capital gains and loss. Capital gains number. What did we talk about earlier? What's the magic number there? Minus 3,000. So what I like to do is if I see a positive number there, I like to look at the year-end brokerage statement. And I say, what could the broker sold prior to year-end to minimize those gains? Okay. And in the case when I looked at that statement, again, this is just a hypothetical, I found 12,000 in losses. The things that they were losses in their portfolio that they could have sold by year-end. And if they would have harvested those losses at 18.8, that's their long-term capital gain rate, they would have saved $2,256. I looked at 3 line items of this tax return: interest, dividends, and capital gains, and I found close to $6,000 in tax savings. And this is not uncommon. This is not uncommon. People don't really want to think about tax. It's not the most exciting topic in the world. But I'll tell you, if you sit on Friday and say, I've looked at your tax return and I found $6,000 in tax savings, guess what? They're going to sit up and take notice. I would. I already got the money spent. You found me $6,000 in tax savings. I'm interested. Help me. Okay. It's there. The best thing you can have is I look at your tax return and I don't find anything. It's like going to the doctor. Your blood drawn at the doctor. What do you want the doctor to say? You get your cholesterol's through the roof, your calcium's low, you got no iron. You don't hear that. You don't hear that. It was that or not. You live your hungry. Your health is not, all get out. But if there was something wrong, what do you want to know about it? You can take medication or fix it. I don't want to pay more $6,000 more than I have to. I'm a patriotic person. If I pay $6,000 less, I'm just as patriotic. That doesn't change. That's brutal. Okay. And there's other things we find on returns too. Schedule A stuff with charitable deductions, how they pay advisor fees, things of this nature. But here are some of the things you can work on. One is, again, asset allocation versus asset location. Where you own certain asset classes does make a difference. If you're going to own equities in your non-qualified accounts, we tend to go with more growth-oriented equities, or what we call low turnover strategies. Buy and hold is back, baby. The Warren Buffett approach. You buy a stock today, hold it for 30 years. Okay? Let time get on your side. Tax-exempt bonds. Everyone should be maximizing their retirement plan contributions. 401k, 403b, whatever you can save. Funding non-deductible IRA, we'll be talking about that. Charitable trust, again, you have clients, big tax problems, I want to sell my business, I'm going to make $5 million. Better call Blue Rock before you make decisions. Trust can be very, very powerful. Okay, here are your funding limits for your different types of plans. Okay, not much change here, as you can see. So if you're over 50 this year, you turn 50 somewhere during this year, guess what? You can put an extra $5,500 into your 401k. You should do that. You can put $23,000 in there. 49 to 50, you get a nice little bump you can put in there. Okay. Here's your Social Security wage base. There was a nice bump there. Okay, you pay Social Security, that's 6.2% if you're employed somewhere. That's what you pay up to. Let me ask you a question. If you make too much money, because there are limitations on deductibility of IRA contributions. If you make too much money to do a deductible IRA, the next thing you possibly could do is a Roth IRA. But let's say you make too much money then. It happens, especially with two-earner couples. Is that it? Am I out of the box now? Can I no longer fund an IRA? The answer is yes, you can still fund an IRA. It's called a non-deductible IRA. As long as you have earnings, you can fund an IRA. Well, why would I do a non-deductible? That doesn't sound too enticing. Well, there's a few things that can be enticing about. One is, if you fund a non-deductible IRA because you couldn't do the traditional or a Roth, it does enjoy tax-deferred growth. So if you're 35, 40 years old, 30 years from retirement, 25 years from retirement, you get 25 years of tax-deferred growth. That's pretty powerful. You fund an IRA, $5,000 a year for 30 years, 6% tax-free return. You're looking at like $600,000, $700,000 for 30 years. That's not chump change. That is not chump change. I'd be looking to do non-deductible. I'm always looking for opportunities to save. It's just the way I grew up. You want to plow money in while you can. Non-deductible IRA. In fact, just when I got married, my wife always had a 401k. So when we got married and our incomes were combined, again, this is the situation. We could not do a deductible IRA, we couldn't do a Roth. So what did I do? Every January, my wife funds a non-deductible IRA. And when we get the Roth conversion, I'm going to tell you a little trick about that. But every January, I write the check. And we fund a non-deductible IRA. And there's a little trick to this, so I'll get into when I get into Roth conversions. Here it is, Roth conversions. I'll continue on with my story. Now, my wife does not have any existing IRAs. Like I said, she's always had a 401k, no existing IRAs. We fund that non-deductible IRA in January. Check clears, about a week later, I rolled over to a Roth. Non-deductible IRA to a Roth. What's the taxability of that event? Zero. That's called Roth through the back door. It's a little quirk in the tax law, totally legal. And when we do case analysis at SEI, I'm always looking for those kind of opportunities. Now, if my wife did have an existing IRA, where we had taken a prior year tax deduction, we'd have to take that into consideration. My point here is, if you have a low balance IRA, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, you should be looking to do these non-deductible contributions and then move the whole thing over to a Roth. Roths are great because when you get into retirement and you take money out of a Roth, is there any taxability to those distributions? No, it's zero. There is no tax. So once you have a Roth, it's tax-free forever. When your kids inherit that Roth IRA, will they have to pay tax on the distributions? No, it's tax-free to them too. It's an amazing thing. If you want the tax man out of your pocket, one of the things that you can do It's accessible to anyone in this room is looking to do these Roth conversions or non-deductible and convert them to a Roth, or even convert your traditional to a Roth when the timing is correct. So think about that. And when you're sitting down with your advisors, one of the questions that should be on that agenda at least once a year is this a good year to do a Roth conversion? Does it make sense? Should I do a non-deductible IRA and fund a Roth, convert it to a Roth? Something I did with my father. I walked up to him at the end of 2012. I said, Dad, I want you to do a Roth conversion. He knows I'm well versed in these things. And he goes, well, Dean, you've told me if I do a Roth conversion, I'm going to have to pay tax. I says, that's right. Guess who's going to pay it? Me. I'm going to write you the check. I'm going to give my father the money to pay for the Roth conversion. Okay. Now, why would I do that? I know I'm a really good son, but why else would I do that? Well, my father will eventually pass. That's just the way of life. But what do you think I'd rather inherit? And my sister rather inherit? A traditional IRA or a Roth? The second thing is, my father's tax bracket is very low. He's on Social Security, he's on pension, doesn't have any expenses anymore, the house is paid for, doesn't travel much or anything. His tax rate is as low as it can get. Mine is quite high. So I was able to do a Roth conversion at his tax rate. That's called generational arbitrage. I do a Roth conversion on one of my IRAs, it's going to cost me a lot of money. Not a good choice. Not a good choice. But at my father's tax rate, very good choice. My point here is, when we think about wealth, it really needs to be about total family wealth, multi-generational wealth planning. You have to think around the corner. When you talk about tax planning, you always have to be thinking around the corner. Things might not be good for you, but you have to look at, well, is it good for my kids? Is it good for my parents? Is it good for my in-laws, my outlaws? Whoever the case may be. Okay. And of course, you can pair tax strategies. That can be very powerful. Roth conversion with funding a charitable remainder trust. Maybe you have a passive activity that became unsuspended and now you have some losses you can take. That's why it needs to be looked at each and every year. I want to get the tax man out of my pocket. And I wouldn't fear that someday they would change the rules. Oh, Dean, why don't they change the rules on that money coming out of a Roth would be taxable? I don't think about that at all. Nor do my tax cognizant friends, because, first of all, it's political suicide if they would change the tax rules going backwards. You'll never get elected again. There'll be so many people who would be against you, it would be incredible. And if they did change it, it would only be on a prospective basis. So if you do this now, I think I can't give you 100% assurance the future is uncertain, but I can certainly feel like 99% sure you'd be safe. Okay? And again, when you have an IRA, you don't have to do the whole thing. You can do it over multiple years. So you can do $20,000 this year, $10,000 next year. You don't feel as though you have a $50,000 IRA. I have to do all in 1 year. You can do it over a period of years. Take a little bit of income each year. Again, managing income. Okay? What am I doing on time? That's all I've done?
30 seconds.
Oh my goodness, I'm going fast. All right, let's talk a little bit about the estate and estate laws. We have a pretty generous estate gift tax exemption. 2014, it's $5.3 million. The tax rate did move up from top rate, used to be 35%, it's now 40%. Gift tax rate, of course, is the same. We have a unified state gift tax law now. And one thing that became permanent when the tax bill was passed in 2013 is this thing called portability. And what that is a married couple each have a $5.3 million exemption to them. And let's say I pass on and I've never used any of my estate or gift tax exemption. I can leave what we'll call the I love you will. I give everything to my wife. The executor of my will can actually port over my unused exemption for my wife's use. So let's say we were worth $10.6 million from $5.3 million. I can port over, she has a $10.6 million estate. The executor can port over my unused exemption. She's got a $10.6 million exemption. Guess what? No estate tax. They would always have that. This was something more recent that got put into the law. Things about it is, though, what if my wife remarries? Heaven forbid. Does she still get my exemption? She loses it. She gets the new husband's exemption. Okay. Something to consider. When they get remarried, ladies, get the full balance sheet, credit report, blood sample, get that estate return, make sure they got an estate exemption you can use. Okay. Now, we do live in a world that people get divorced and remarried, have kids from different marriages, and if you want certain assets to go to certain people, you will need to use trusts. That's the only way you can kind of guarantee where things are going to go. Will they save you on tax? Most times, no. Most times I would say trust planning is not so much about, these types of trust planning is not so much about tax savings, it's more about who gets what. Who gets what. And of course, you have your annual gift exclusion. I can give everyone in this room $14,000. I'll be writing checks after the presentation. I don't even have to file a gift tax return. Okay? So husband and wife want a gift, anyone, right? Grandkids. They can get $14,000 each to each grandkid. Don't have to file a gift tax return. It's a great way to start estate planning. You know, if you have a taxable estate, and maybe you don't have a taxable estate now, but maybe the future is bright and you will have a taxable estate. Well, you can start liquidating part of your estate. But when you're gifting, should I gift cash or should I gift something else? Most times you probably don't want to gift cash because cash is kind of a tax inefficient asset. You might want to gift things that they might be able to sell when they get it in their hands at a lower tax rate than you would sell them. Appreciated securities, for instance, or shares in a family limited partnership, where discounts might be available. Okay? So there's some very interesting estate gift tax planning, trust planning, even with a rather sizable estate tax exemption. There's not that many people file estate returns. Very, very few. Most Americans don't have $10 million. Okay? Most Americans don't. All right, let's talk about the CRT. This is a very interesting, when people come and call us and they have tax problems, a lot of times one of the strategies we'll be talking about is using a charitable remainder trust. It comes in two flavors, charitable remainder unit trust and charitable remainder annuity trust. And the difference really is how the payout of the trust works. It's a split interest trust, meaning there's a current income beneficiary of the trust, and then there's a remainder beneficiary of the trust. Now with the CRT, let's say I'm the grantor of this trust, and I've worked at Merck all my life, and now I have $5 million of Merck stock in my name, and the cost basis is $100,000. If I decide to sell my Merck stock, that's a $4.9 million gain at 23.8%. Do the math, that's a huge tax bill. I don't want to pay that tax. What can I do? Well, I'm not saying I would put all the stock that I own of Merck into this, but whatever stocks I transfer into the CRT and then sell, guess what my tax bill is then? Zero. Bupkis. That's a technical term, bupkis. No tax bill. Okay. The CRT is a charitable, it's recognized by the IRS as a charitable organization. Okay. I put that stock in there, I get out of a huge tax bill. The trust must pay me a minimum of 5% out every year. That's the rules of a CRT. Minimum 5%. Also, because it is a charitable organization, I actually get a charitable deduction up front. Not for the whole amount I put in, okay, but a nice chunk. And I'll go over an example with you. And I can have the payout based on, let's say, as long as my wife or I are living, the trust will pay me this annual distribution. Of course, there is taxability to that annual distribution, but the fact is I put in a highly appreciated asset, so the income that's going to be coming out of this trust for many, many years is going to be long-term capital gain, which is tax favored, and I get to stretch that income out over many years. Didn't I talk about managing income earlier? It's exactly a technique to manage income. If there's money still left in the trust, when my wife and I pass on, public charity that I have named will then receive the proceeds from that trust. And it has to be a real charity. Can't be like George Costanza and Seinfeld created the human fund. We check on that. It has to be a real 501c3. You put a donor advised fund on the back end of that. If you weren't in good health, you may want to do a term certain so that, let's say I was not married and I had kids, and I decided to do one of these CRTs, maybe I'm 65 years old, but if I'm not in good health, I might not get a payoff for very long. So if I put a lot of money into this, it may not be such a good thing. I could do, let's say, 20-year payout, so that if I pass on after 2 years, my children will get it for another 18 before it goes to the charity. Here's a real-life example that I did. Let's see here. This was a woman, she was on the elderly side, not too old, 76. 76 years old. And she had, I've done these for people who are not even charitably inclined. Okay, even though it's called a charitable remainder trust, I've had many clients that are very tax motivated, did this, and really weren't really interested in charity. They saw the tax benefits and said, let's do it. If you're charitably inclined, all the better. So this woman was charitably inclined. She was 76. So it wasn't as big numbers I was talking about. She would put in $250,000 worth of highly appreciated stock. The cost basis was $60,000, so there was a $190,000 gain. Now the $190,000 gain at 18.8% is $36,000 in tax. So by funding this trust with that highly appreciated asset, selling it inside the trust, she got out of a $36,000 federal tax bill. Now, being at 76, as I said, the minimum payout of a charitable remainder trust is 5%. The max is dependent upon life expectancy, the Section 7520 rate, a couple other things. In her case, the top payout that she could get per year is 35%. 35% of the trust value. Because her life expectancy at 76 isn't all that long. Pretty amazing. Okay, so it's 35% of the trust value at the end of the year. It's not 35% per year, so it would be all exhausted in 3 years. But point being is there's a lot of flexibility in the kind of income she could get back. Of course, that does affect the deduction. If she does a 5% payout, her charitable deduction would have been $154,000. And at a 28% tax bracket, that would have saved her $43,000 in tax. Now, with charitable deductions, there is limitations how much you can take per year. What's the nice thing about charitable deductions, if you can't use it all this year, there's a 5-year carry forward. So I'm sure she'll get to use it all. Now, the 35% payout, her charitable deduction goes way down. Instead of $150,000, it goes down to $27,000. And her tax benefit then is only about $7,600. A lot of leeway in there, though. A lot of leeway. Okay. So they're very flexible. You have buyer's remorse. Whatever you put into these things, it's irrevocable. Once it goes in, you can get your money out over time, but you can't change your mind 6 months from now and say, I want my money back. Too bad. Too bad. It's not the way it works. It's an irrevocable gift. You know, if you have a situation like this, these things would be very powerful. Not only we put highly appreciated stock, we put businesses in here before they got sold. We sell business through these things. There's different things that this can be used for. And there's a lot of flavors to these things. Question?
Can you put a piece of a business in there?
Yes, you can put a piece of a business in there. In fact, in one case, that's what we did. Like 50% of the business went into CRT, 50% was sold outside the CRT. Whole 100% of the business was sold, and half of it was placed in the CRT before it was sold. Absolutely. Absolutely. But we're seeing a lot more of this type of work because of this new tax law. People are seeing these huge, humongous tax bills that they're going to have to pay, and they say, what can we do to get out of it? And there are some strategies around that. Okay. Of course, kids might feel bad. You fund a CRT with $2 million worth of stock, and the kids are like, hey, that was my inheritance. Well, you can replace that pretty easily. For instance, if they're insurable, you could buy a, let's say, second to die life insurance policy, put it inside an irrevocable life insurance trust, and get their kids back their inheritance. And it would be tax-free. It's structured right that the insurance payout would be tax-free. Okay? So we took care of the kids. These can be very, very powerful. And again, it's amazing how people react to these, even though they're not charitable class. So, you would look at a trust and say, I'm not interested in that. Then I show them the power, and I'm interested. Let's talk more about it. You do need a lawyer to draw up a document. It is a trust agreement. Depends on who you hire. $1,500, $2,000 to draw up a document. Okay, it's a one-time cost. Of course, in the case of SCI, shameless plug, we are a trust company. We charge $2,000 a year for full trust administration, including the preparation of the tax return. And regardless of the size of the trust. You wouldn't want to do this for too little money either. When I say too little, our minimum is $250,000, but I think you really need to do at least $500,000 for this to make sense. Any questions on charitable trusts? On anything I've talked about so far? Taking it all in? One of the services that we do provide, and I think it's incredibly important, and I will put it on your agenda. When you're meeting with your advisors, bring in your tax return. We went over a lot of stuff today, saying this applicable to me. What can we do to save on taxes? I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have. Okay? There's things that could be done. Is it asset allocation? Is it tax efficiency of my investments? Is it how I'm paying, how I'm doing my charitable contributions, how I pay my advisor fees? Does Roth conversions make sense? Okay, there should be a whole checklist that you work through to see what makes sense. I showed you 3 line items, pretty simple to concentrate on: interest, dividends, cap gains. Now, they're not necessarily in your CPA's wheelhouse because they're investment related. Not all CPAs are investment people, per se. They can be very good tax people, but they might not be investment people. They might not have proper licensing and training to discuss those matters. It's okay, but you certainly need coordination with your CPA and financial planner / investment advisor. That's very, very important. If they're not talking, that's a problem. That's a problem. Because again, when you start contemplating transactions, you do need to do tax projections. It's a pretty important part of the process. What if I go left? What if I go right? What if I go straight? There's tax ramifications to all of that. And that may guide you as to where you want to go. Say this again, taxes are very, very complex. Very complex. Don't shy away from it. Embrace it. Minimize your tax volatility. Everyone kind of has like a natural tax rate. I don't want it disturbed. I want very little vibration around my natural tax rate. When there's vibration around your natural tax rate, it's going to be a problem. Especially on the high side. Now, if your rate happens to go down, take full advantage of it. But I don't want my rate going up, spiking up. Very bad. Very bad. And of course, tax dollars saved is like 3 tax dollars earned. Work hard for your money, right? You want to hold on to it. Any questions for me? I have to have this slide up for 5 seconds. My legal department requires. Questions?
I saw a graphic that talked about how Vanguard is the cheapest money manager around. They have low fees, and everything is great about Vanguard, and they have a lot of good things that go in part with their investments. Talk about tax sensitivity that maybe another company could provide, maybe even SCI, as it relates to the investments inside of portfolios versus something like Vanguard, and the difference between tax versus cost.
Right. Yeah, there are investment options out in the universe. Okay, there's indexing is popular, also known as exchange-traded funds, ETFs, and there's active management where you buy individual managers or mutual funds, and they're making decisions on buy to sell. ETFs are typically just representative of certain asset classes, certain index. And when it comes to equity, ETFs, especially on the domestic side, like the S&P 500, are pretty tax efficient. It's just the way they're comprised of. But it's a passive approach. It's a passive approach. you want to lose weight, you got to move more and eat less. That takes active pivot. Don't put the fork to your mouth, go to the gym. If you really want to do it right, you've got to be active. So for many people, ETFs is probably a basic way to do tax management. But again, only on certain equity classes is it good. On fixed income, I'd be very hesitant. And international markets, I'd be very hesitant to use ETFs and think I'm getting total really good tax efficiency, just because of the way they're comprised. But if you want to have active tax management, there's a real benefit to it. In our studies, through our separate account program, we're saving clients about 127 basis points per year in active tax management. $1 million account, that's 12 grand a year. 12 grand. You can't do that through an ETF. There's no way. There's just no way that's going to happen. Because it's passive. You just get it. With the active approach, we're making decisions that are tax motivated to reduce the tax burden. And there's a difference there. And we can make it happen. And there's a tax smart way to invest. I'm not knocking ETFs altogether. I'm just saying if you have a tax managed situation, I would think if you have the right attitude, I think you're better off with active versus passive. Generally speaking. I answered your question.
Yeah. Are there active mutual funds aside from ETFs that would produce a better result than an ETF maybe?
Oh, absolutely.
Aside from an SEI?
Well, even Vanguard, I mean, just use them as an example, that they have tax managed mutual funds. They do active tax management too. They have passive, and they have tax managed. The other thing, if you want the ultimate tax control, you can't really use mutual funds. Again, you're part of a crowd. The best tax control you can get is owning individual securities, individual stocks and bonds, bought for you personally. Then you have the ultimate tax control. Then you can have what I'm going to sell, what am I going to buy, how am I going to reinvest, how am I going to rebalance. Nothing is put on to you. With mutual fund, again, you have no choice. If you're a shareholder, this is it. You have no choice. With individual securities, you have all the choices in the world. And so when you have when you're higher tax bracket, and you don't mind owning individual securities, I think that is the ultimate tax control. And it can be totally customized. And for a lot of reasons. For instance, let's say I work at work. Well, if I buy a mutual fund, a large cap mutual fund, guess what? They're going to own pharmaceutical stocks in there. They're part of the index. Okay? They're going to be in there. But I already have a ton of stock in a pharmaceutical company. Why do I need more? Well, in a separate account solution, that could be avoided. Buy everything but pharmaceutical stocks. Okay? Customized. Some of you may be socially conscious, meaning I don't want any alcohol, tobacco, firearms, no nukes. I guess my time's up.
You got news?
I don't need this. Does it get recorded?
You don't need it.
Okay. So if you want to, for instance, not have those types of asset class, those types of investments in an individual security account, you can do that. Okay. We have clients that are interested in following like an Islamic investment philosophy. We can do that. Okay. A lot of things that can be customized for people who have certain things they want to get done. So whatever existing positions you have can be incorporated into a portfolio too. So just because you own things, they don't necessarily have to be sold. They can be incorporated. Of course, there could be a tax transition, how you handle that. Good questions. Anything else?
Question. You talked about converting a IRA to a Roth IRA.
Yes.
Okay, and some of the tricks about doing that. Do you get into also, when discussing with your clients who are working, who have earned income, the choice between a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k, and when it's a good idea to choose Roth over traditional?
Okay, the question is around what for some employers now have offered not only a traditional 401k, but they also have an investment option of a Roth 401k. And when would I, let's say, contribute one versus another? And there's several considerations to that. I would think if I was very young, for instance, in my 20s, and since my tax bracket was very low, where a tax deduction wouldn't make any sense to me, or very little sense to me, in the sense that I wouldn't get much savings, I'd probably go with the Roth for a while, 100%. Now, as I got older and I found that my tax rate was up higher, I would be looking to get the tax deferral and contribute to the traditional 401k. But for many years, that would be a choice. And then as I got, let's say over 50, I'd probably look to start bleeding into the Roth, only because I want to set up a tax-free bucket. To me, financial planning, if I have 3 buckets, a taxable account, a tax-deferred, and a tax-free, that's the ultimate for me as a financial planner. Because now I could get the tax temperature right. It's like, I like a hot shower in the morning, but I have to put a little cold water in the hot water to get the temperature right. If all I have is hot water, which is a traditional IRA and a non-qualified account, all I have is hot water. And guess what? You get burned. You need the cold water, which is the Roth. I'd be looking to bleed into that as time went on. But I'll caution you on one thing. As part of the new tax law, they did allow you to convert your traditional 401k into a Roth 401k. Okay, there is that option. Now, which might be okay, but there's one thing that you can't do in there that you can do on the outside. Let's say I have a very large IRA, $200,000, and I decide I want to convert that, or $100,000 worth, $100,000 conversion. That's a big conversion. Now, on the outside, what I would advise is that you set up, let's say, 2 Roths, but $50,000 in one, $50,000 in another. Maybe that's your allocation, 50% stocks, 50% bonds. So you have 2 Roths, each with 50, and different investments. You have until October of next year to make up your mind whether you want that Roth conversion to stay or not. Because you go on extension with your tax return, you have until October 15th of next year. So you have to pay your money in April. October, let's say the stock account is not worth 50 anymore, it's up to worth $65,000. Well, I only have to pick up income of 50, it's worth 65, I'll stick. Okay, it's like having a good hand in blackjack. I got 20 here. Right? Dealer's showing a 7. I'm in pretty good shape. Let's say my bonds started at 50, now they're down to 40. Okay? The dealer's got a 7, I'm showing a 5. That's not a good card to have. I'm going to have to take a hit here. Okay? Why would I pay tax on an account that when it started was 50, but it's only worth 40? What I can do is I can recharacterize that Roth that's all bonds as if it didn't happen. This is an unbelievable part of the tax code, that you can do a transaction and then change your mind later and it's completely legal. That's the only one I can think of that you could do this with. We're talking about the CRT. Once you put your money in, that's it, it's over. But this, you can actually change your mind for any reason, for spite. Remember when Jerry tried to return a jacket, Seinfeld? Which you were going to return a jacket? For spite. That's not, doesn't mean one of our qualifications, remember? But here, for spite, you can say, I don't want to do the Roth. And the thing about it is, come October of next year, let's say you do recharacterize it back to traditional, come January of 2016, you can do it again. It's like running the pick and roll. Okay? You've been watching the basketball playoffs? Okay? It's like running the pick and roll. It doesn't work the first time, roll it again, run it again. There's no rule to say you can do this over and over and over and over again. You can't do a recharacterization inside of 401k. So I mean, if you go to Roth from your traditional 401k to the Roth 401k, that's a one-way street. No recharacterization. So if you do it there, you better be really sure what you're doing. On the outside, you don't have to be so sure. But you do, if you do a large conversion, you should break it up into a couple. Because you can't cherry pick out of one Roth what went up, what went down, and try to only recharacterize part of the account. It doesn't work. Good question. Any others?
All right. Dean, thank you very much.
Thank you.